Hey everyone, so I am here with the man who needs no introduction. He's the host of The Jimmy Dore Show and Aggressive Progressives on TYT Network. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Jimmy Dore here on the Humanist Report. Thank you so much, Jimmy, for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure, Mike. Thanks for having me. You were fantastic when we did the live show in Portland. Did you have a good time?
It was amazing. I honestly, it was the time of my life. It was so much fun meeting you and Steph and Ron and seeing everyone that watches the shows and believes the same things that we believe, and they're so passionate. It really made me feel reinvigorated about politics because, I mean, we both know this year has been pretty fucked up for politics. I mean, we've been dealing with so much that I really felt demoralized, but that show kind of gave me a new lease on life, at least when it comes to the progressive movement. And I just think it was so great. Thank you for inviting me, by the way. First of all, to that. That was just, Portland loved you.
First of all, I don't know if you remember, not to blow too much smoke up your ass here, but they did give you a standing ovation when you came out. So Portland loves you also. Well, we love Portland.
That's
awesome.
I knew
Portland was going to be a great city for us because when we did our Indiegogo, which is over a year and a half ago now, that was our biggest city for donations was Portland. So I knew it was going to be fantastic, and it was. So yeah, thanks for doing that show. Everyone loved you on it. You were very funny, like I told you would be.
Thank you so much.
And I'm glad you had a good time. By the way, that guy Cloobeck, who we made fun of on that show, you know, the guy who told the DNC that he's going to cut their money off if they use the millionaire and billionaire word, and he looked like Eric Hartman.
Yep.
He has now DM'd me on Twitter 3 times. Now, I haven't responded to either of them. In fact, he doesn't even know I've seen them because I have my Twitter. Anybody can direct message me, but they don't know I've looked at it until I accept their message, which I haven't accepted any of his messages, and he still keeps messaging me, threatening to sue me. He wants me to be afraid, and I'm not afraid. It's so funny to watch a millionaire shit his pants because a bunch of nobodies were making fun of him in Portland.
That's amazing to me. How is he going to sue us? Because he put himself out there to be criticized. He went on MSNBC and threatened to cut off funding from the party if they weren't still beholden to him. And he didn't expect criticism, and now that he's gotten criticism, apparently, he wants to sue you for it. Stephen, fuck off.
Yeah, he's you made yourself a public figure when you went on television, so now people get to say whatever they want about you.
Exactly. And I'm sorry, but he is worth over $100 million. So if he really wants to cry himself to sleep at night because we hurt his feelings, then I'm sure he can dry his tears with all of those dollar bills that he's sleeping on in his bed that he probably just throws out and just kind of like lays all over. Yeah. So we're not making many friends. Right. Yeah, we're not making many friends, Jimmy, but that's okay because all of these people who are rich and corrupt, they can go fuck themselves, and I don't want them to be our friends. In fact, who was it? It was FDR, I think, that said they despise me and I want them to when it comes to the oligarchs and the elites. That perfectly sums it up.
The quote was, "Never before in the history of our country has big money been more unified in their hatred for me. I welcome their hate."
I love it.
I could also be paraphrasing it.
No, that sounds better. I think that you were more correct than I was on that. But I think people get the general sentiment. Like these rich people, they hold us in contempt. And I think that the way he's DMing you constantly, it shows it. So Stephen Cloobeck, I mean, if he wants to sue you, he'll probably have to include me in the lawsuit. So I guess we'll both be in court, Jimmy. And everyone else who talked about him. He's going to have a fun time subpoenaing all of us.
It's funny to watch a guy who's been able to have people wait on him hand and foot his whole life because he's rich and everybody jumps when he snaps his fingers, and then he gets a couple of jackass YouTube guys who don't listen to him, and he's like, "You will respect my authority." No, not.
No, and this is new for him, Jimmy. I think that we've opened his life up to a whole new experience because I'm sure, like, if you have $100 million, you have surrounded yourself with yes men and yes women, so you probably don't get much pushback, even if you say something just completely idiotic. So to have people criticize him on a stage and have people in that audience agree with us and laugh and make fun of him, I mean, that's gotta, for the first time in your life to experience that's gotta be a wake-up call, and that's why he's so butthurt about it. So I don't feel bad about it whatsoever. I think he's gonna be just fine with all of his money.
Yeah, I bet he'll be okay.
Yeah. We're not gonna shed any tears for you, Stephen. We'll play the tiniest violin in the world for you.
speaking about that, though, Mike, I mean, could there be a better example of what's wrong with our political system than a guy who doesn't even have the awareness to know that he shouldn't go on TV and say the stuff he's about to say, that he doesn't, what he's literally was saying when he said that was, we're the ones who control politics in America. We're the ones who tell our legislators what to legislate and what to do because I'm rich. And if they don't do what we say, we're going to screw them. That's not democracy. That's not America. That's not how our system's supposed to work. And so what he thought was going on there to have the Democratic Party fall in line, and what he really did was embolden people like you and me to push back even harder against the Democrats, the corporatists in the Democratic Party. That's what it actually did. It exposed the Democratic Party to be even more corporate than anybody thought they were. So it was a horrible thing he did for himself, for the party, for whatever aims he thought he had, because now it's been he helped expose the lie that there's two different parties. There's one party, and it's the money party.
Right. That's what politics is all about in this country. Whichever party gets the most money from the special interests, they're going to represent that special interest. And we've seen that time and again. And you've talked about it on your show. I've talked about it on my show. But I tried to think about the logic behind that interview with Stephen Cloobeck on MSNBC, and I couldn't figure out what he thought would be the result of this interview. Did he think he would be applauded? Did he think, oh, somebody's got to say this finally, and I'm going to be applauded. People are going to come out and cheer and say, yes, finally somebody said what needed to be said. I mean, what did you expect would happen when we have record-breaking income and wealth inequality in this country? Did you think that the peasants in this country would just sit back and see a millionaire demanding that the party not represent anyone but them and be fine with that? It's mind-boggling.
They're obviously, part of the problem being out of touch is that you're out of touch and you don't know how badly people have it, right? So you don't know how close they are to an actual revolution because you're a millionaire. So that's where it's phrases like, oh, they're out of bread, well, let them eat cake. That's where that comes from. And that's what Stephen Cloobeck, he's one of those guys, right? He's like, don't do legislation that helps people who are being crushed by this economy right now. Don't pass legislation that helps students who want to get ahead. Don't pass legislation that helps sick people. What he was advocating was for tax relief for millionaires and billionaires. That's what he was advocating for. And by the way, he just got it.
Yeah.
So he's really happy right now, and he's pretending to be upset.
Right. And, what you said was perfect about him being out of touch, because really, the problems that he faces are so different than the problems that ordinary Americans faces. I think probably to him, making only $10 million in profit is a bad month for him. I think to him, only being able to buy 2 more private jets and 1 more yacht this month is probably a bad month for him. But to us, it's completely, we don't live in that world, we can barely fucking afford to eat. In a lot of instances, we have to decide whether or not we're going to feed our children or not. I don't understand how someone is so out of touch. But I mean, I guess that's what money does to you.
So when you see a guy like that, again, not to horror on Stephen Cloobeck, but it's such a perfect example of what's wrong with our politics today. Like when any normal person sitting at home watching him go on MSNBC, by the way, with a host who did no pushback on what he was saying. So that's supposed to be a journalist sitting there, let a millionaire completely dictate which way the party's supposed to go. And at no place in her head does she go, this is kind of not how democracy is supposed to work. Right. You're actually articulating what all the progressives have been claiming have been happening in the party. You're actually revealing that it's true, and you're kind of articulating what's wrong with politics. She didn't say any of that shit. She went along with them. So again, there's so many things instructive about that video. I think if there's any video this year that could tell you more about what's wrong with politics in the United States and why we got Trump, I mean, that's why we got Trump. If somebody wants to say, oh, we got Trump because of Bernie Sanders supporters, or Bernie was too critical of Hillary, or Susan Sarandon, or Josh Fox, or whatever they say, or racism or sexism, all you have to do is play that video and go, that's why they lost. That's why, because everyone sees that the parties are beholden to nobody else except their donors, which is why we have half the country poor, low income, 63% of Americans can't afford a $1,000 emergency, and why they voted for Donald Trump and half the country stay home, because they didn't want to come out and vote for Hillary Clinton, because if you remember in Michigan, a lot of those people were African Americans, and she called them super predators while gutting welfare. And Bill Clinton at the same time was repealing the New Deal banking legislation, which means the economy crashed within 10 years after him doing that. And who got hurt the most by that, Mike? Black and brown people who played by the rules and went to college. They're the ones who got hurt the worst in this economic downturn. And then Barack Obama kicked them out of their houses. 5.1 million families got kicked out of their houses after the stock market crash, which was directly related to Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. And then Barack Obama brought in Timothy Geithner to kick those families out of their houses. He didn't save those families' houses. That was part of how he was going to fix the banks, was by giving those houses to the banks, which is exactly what he did.
Yeah, exactly. You said it all perfectly. You took the words out of my mouth. Yeah, and everything that we've been saying and everything that you just said, it was proven right in that particular segment. I mean, not only how the media sucks, because I don't know if you caught it before the interview started. I think it was Stephanie Rule who said, "I'm here with my friend Stephen Cloobeck." So I mean, this is someone who, it's a colleague of hers apparently. They've been friends. I don't know for how long. And then he proved us right by basically saying everything that we suspected, that yeah, the party is still beholden to me, and if they choose to go in a different path, then I'm going to punish them for it. Now that I have you on, I couldn't wait to get your opinion on this. So, of course, Doug Jones defeated pedophile Roy Moore in Alabama, and I suspect, and I think you probably agree with this, that the Democratic Party is going to take away all of the wrong conclusions, and we kind of have evidence for this. I want to read you a quote from Joe Manchin here. So he states that this speaks volumes for what we call the radical middle, those of us still in the moderate middle centrist Democrats. And also he encourages Doug Jones to be an Alabama Democrat, not a Washington Democrat. So is he pretty much just encouraging him to be a Republican? What is your thoughts on that? Because it sounds like that to me.
There's no doubt about it. I watched on election night. I was watching the Chris Matthews, his portion of it, and he could not stop telling. He would bring out a progressive. He brought on someone from MoveOn.org, and then he would say to them, "Now, are you going to push him, Doug Jones, to go to the left? Or are you going to let him vote with the Republicans so he can get reelected?" And it's like, well, what's the point of electing a Democrat, Chris? So immediately, Chris Matthews is advocating for someone to move to the right. Of course, that's why we got Trump again. And that's why we have shows, Mike, because of how horrible guys like Chris Matthews are, right?
Right.
And a lot of people use the term sellout, but God damn it, if those people at MSNBC aren't 100% bought and fucking sold, I've never seen someone who's bought and sold, because they are.
Do you think that they'll use this as ammunition that, yeah, they should run as centrists and they shouldn't be more progressive?
They're already doing that. They're saying it because the Democrats did really well in Virginia and they did well in Alabama, so maybe it's time we run some more centrists, because a progressive would never win in Alabama. This is the stuff they're saying. And so when Chris Matthews said that to the woman from MoveOn.org, he says, "Are you going to push her to be progressive?" And she says, "Yes." And he said, "Even in Alabama, if you might lose?" And she said, "Yes, we believe." So what she didn't say, which what I would have said, was, Chris, the reason we advocate for progressive policies isn't because of a personal fetish. We advocate for progressive policies is because they actually make people's lives better and they build a better country. So if you make people's lives better, Chris, they're going to vote for you. What you're saying is you don't believe that progressive policies make people's lives better, and you think that those are losers in elections. You're wrong about that. The reason why people don't vote progressive is because of people like you, Chris. Once you go and make the argument, they've done these polls over and over, and most of the Americans line up behind progressive policy ideas. That's a fact. Every time they do one of those things, Americans come down on the side of the progressive values. Most people are for Medicare for all. Most people are for free college. 80% of the country was for a public option when Barack Obama was passing his Mitt Romney care. 90% of the people want some kind of gun legislation after Sandy Hook. So we don't get it. So most of the people are progressive, but you get people like Chris Matthews and people like Debbie Wasserman Schultz and people like Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, and they're going to tell you the exact opposite, that, okay, now that all those black people voted for you in Alabama, it's time to stick the knife in their back and vote against them. That's fucking crazy. I don't know who. That's why the Democrats are wiped out from coast to coast, Mike. That's why we got Donald Trump, because these are the people who are paid by their donors to think this way.
Right. And when you are basically carried into that seat because 98% of women of color voted for you, to turn around and betray them by voting with Republicans on anything, I think that's egregious. And I love what Doug Jones said, why he was victorious was because he's middle of the road. It's not because he's not a pedophile and Roy Moore is. It's totally because of his, the inspiration and whatnot in his campaign. Because like Tom Perez says, when you put hope on the ballot, you win. And apparently that's what happened. But in my mind, the way that I see this is that, and I think I alluded to this on my show, but I don't remember when I talked about it. Let's face it, Doug Jones is going to be a one-term senator from Alabama. If he was up against any other Republican.
So try to get as much shit done as you can. So try to get as much progressive shit done as you can, right?
Exactly. Go balls to the wall. Vote for Medicare for all. Go fucking crazy because you're going to lose anyway. So why not try something like we've been telling you to try and maybe prove us wrong? Be extra progressives and see if you can actually win in a deep red state like Alabama. I mean, it might be difficult to win even if you're progressive, but I mean, you're going to lose anyway. So the worst case scenario is you lose and accomplish a lot of progressive policies that help the people who helped you get elected. People of color, poor people.
What I don't understand, Mike, is that you and I both know that the majority of Americans are for Medicare for all, right? Even including a majority of Republicans. So how could advocating that position, which is super progressive, it's more progressive than the Democratic position right now. So how could pushing something like that, which is super progressive but also super popular, how is that supposed to lose you an election? That doesn't make any sense. Again, it doesn't make any sense. It's this idea that these people don't like that stuff. But if you look at the polling, the data is they're for that stuff. The problem is they don't have anybody to fucking vote for who's for it. That's the real problem. And so what they're going to get now is a corporate Democrat who's not going to push for Medicare for all, who's not going to push for free college, who's not going to push for a $15 minimum wage, who's not going to push for progressive policies, who's not going to push for ending the wars or cutting the budget for the Pentagon in half. He's not going to. And so those people are going to go, well, my life's just as shitty as it was 6 years ago, so I'm going to vote for the Republican because he hates who I hate.
Exactly. And I think that the point that you brought up about Chris Matthews is perfect, because in asking someone from Move On, are you going to still try to make him be progressive, or are you going to allow him to vote Republican so he gets reelected? This is why people don't come out and vote for Democrats, because they know that regardless of who they vote for, particularly in these red states, I mean, if you look at West Virginia and Joe Manchin is a Republican, basically. I mean, I don't know what he's done that even qualifies him as liberal in any way, shape, or form. I mean, I guess he did vote against the GOP tax plan, so not to contradict myself, but that's one area. But he goes along with the Republicans. He votes with Trump a majority of the time. So these people aren't going to get out of their houses, wait in lines, try to deal with these voter suppression tactics to vote for someone who's going to fuck them over a little bit less. That's why people don't vote for Democrats. And I'm just... it frustrates me that they're not going to take away the conclusion that is the correct conclusion. I actually have a friend, Ashley Hudson. She hosts the Establishment Exiles podcast with me. And like the day after Roy Moore won, she sent me a message saying people around her are telling her maybe neoliberals are okay in Alabama and we don't have to pressure them to be progressive, and it's driving her nuts. And it's driving me nuts too.
How could that not drive you crazy, right? I mean, that's exactly the wrong idea. That's exactly how we got Trump. And so their answer is do more to the stuff that got us Trump. That's the craziest thing I've ever heard. And by the way, it was being screamed at the top of Chris Matthews' over and over. It wasn't one time he said it. He said it to every person who came on the show. He said, so do you think that they're going to allow him to vote Republican so he can keep us safe? Do you think Chuck Schumer is going to allow him to vote Republican? Do you think, by the way, Chuck Schumer is 100% behind the Republican foreign policy. I don't know if you've seen that, but he's also for Jerusalem, Trump's policy on Jerusalem. So there's your resistance.
Yeah, in other words, he's for setting the Middle East on fire and creating chaos at in a region of the world that's already incredibly volatile. So to not, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you covered the story, he encouraged Donald Trump, like he critiqued Donald Trump for not doing this sooner. Is that correct?
Yes, he wagged his finger at Donald Trump, the word he used for his indecisiveness. That's what Chuck Schumer said, for his indecisiveness about whether to do the Jerusalem move or not. Meaning, do the Jerusalem move, dummy. Don't be as indecisive. That's what Chuck Schumer's counsel was to Donald Trump on this. So, again, the whole world sees that this is a radical move that's going to just cause nothing but violence. And the Democratic leader, 100% for it. You know who else is for it, Mike? Hillary Clinton is for it. You know who else is for it? Barack Obama is for it. So Chuck Schumer, Barack Obama, and Hillary Clinton. Doesn't matter who you vote for, you're going to get the same shit, which is exactly what we've been saying. With the problem with the last election, if you voted for one of the two main parties, was there was no way to vote against Goldman Sachs. There was no way to vote against more war. There was no way to vote against Exxon or Big Pharma or Silicon Valley. There was no way to vote against more fracking. So that's what the problem was, Mike. That's why half the country stayed home. That's why we're in the mess we're in. Again, I have to keep saying it. Trump is not the problem. He's a symptom of the problem. People didn't wake up because their lives were going great and decided to vote for a fucking orange clown game show host. They did that because he was speaking like a populist. Even though they knew it probably wasn't going to happen, they had no other choice. And that's what was told to me on this show by Nick Smith, a cook at a Waffle House in Virginia. He told me that they knew that Donald Trump was a loudmouth Yankee who should have gotten his ass kicked a long time ago. But he said these people here are desperate in cold country. They were desperate for someone to say they were going to make their lives better. And Trump did. Even though they knew he was probably lying, at least they have a little bit of hope. Now they know. So that was the problem. Trump, again, not the problem. He's a symptom of the problem. And the Democrats and the establishment media, meaning CNN, ABC, NBC, and MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post, are all pretending like the problem started January 25th, 2017, which it didn't.
Exactly. And I feel like what we're asking, it's not that much. So basically, we're just asking for a party that represents us, but what the Democratic Party is, in effect, is a party that just doesn't go along with all of the shitty things that the Republicans do. When I see people like Dore Tandon have resistance as her Twitter icon, it drives me fucking nuts because they don't resist Trump when it really matters. I mean, she was cheerleading him on when he bombed Syria illegally. I saw her tweet before she blocked me, mind you. I don't know if you're blocked by her. She cheerleaded him for that. How do you cheerlead him for illegally bombing a country that didn't attack us? And you say you are resisting it. I'm going crazy, Jimmy.
Because Dore Tandon is not the resistance. Dore Tandon is the problem. Dore Tandon is a corporatist who's for a lower minimum wage, who's for less regulations on Wall Street, who's for more war, obviously. Dore Tandon doesn't realize, hey, there's a Republican Party. You could go be a Republican. So she's basically a Republican who's cool with abortion. That's what Dore Tandon is. That's what Hillary Clinton is. That's what fucking Bill Clinton was. They're Republicans who are cool with abortion. And by the way, Hillary Clinton, not 100% cool with abortion, by the way. Right. She was totally open to restricting abortion, just so you guys know. So they're worse than you think. Again, the focus, they want you to be focused on Donald Trump. They want you to be focused on Russia. They want you to be focused on Roy Moore. But what they don't want you focused on is the fact that Barack Obama opened the Arctic to drilling twice. What they don't want you to focus on is the reason why we have all these fracking pipes underneath the earth right now is because Barack Obama got rid of the regulation that said you couldn't export fossil fuels. That's why they're racing to put all these pipes underneath the earth in the United States that weren't there before. It's not because we want the fracked gas for ourselves. It's because they want to export fracked gas. That's what the Keystone oil line is. They want to take oil from Canada, not bring it to the United States, but bring it through the United States so it can get on a ship in the Gulf and they can send it to China. That's what this is all about. It's not about for fossil fuels or energy for the United States. And who do we have to thank for that? Barack Obama. And who won't tell you about that? The fucking mainstream press. MSNBC will never tell you Barack Obama opened the Arctic to drilling twice, but they'll tell you when Trump does it. They won't tell you that's why we have DAPL, that's why we have all these pipelines, is because of Barack Obama's corporatism and neoliberalism. They're not going to tell you the problem. Joyanne Reid will not tell you the problem is neoliberalism. She's going to tell you the problem is progressives.
Yeah, because we're the ones who are calling out all of these issues. And you and I, Jimmy, we've made a lot of friends this year. I mean, Peter Dow, Tom Watson, Stephen Cloobeck. And these are people on the supposed left that they think that we're the problem because in criticizing Democrats, there's this underlying assumption that we agree with Republicans when that's not true at all. I mean, we are the loudest voices against their policies that fuck over the middle class and the poor. But what we're saying is if we want to defeat these scumbags, the Democratic Party, who currently is the main opposition against them, has to get their fucking shit together. I mean, do you agree with it? Do you see this a lot? Because I often get criticized as being not just the Russian shill, but basically Republican plant sometimes and whatnot. So what do you say to people that say that we're being too hard on the Democratic Party? I say that we're not being too hard because we have to be as hard as we can be so they get their shit together quickly.
Well, what I tell people is that, well, when we get rid of Trump, we have to have something to replace him with. And if we don't have something to replace him with, we're going to get another Trump. But it won't be an incompetent Trump. Trump is a good guy to have if you're going to have a right-winger in the White House because he shoots himself in the dick 3 times before he gets out of bed, right? So he can't stop tweeting, right? It's like, oh, let's see if I can obstruct justice. And I'll shoot myself in the dick today. And with a tweet, so he can't stop doing that stuff, and that's why I'd rather have Trump as president. You got to have some, as opposed to Mike Pence, not as opposed to anybody else. You got to have something to replace Trump with. Otherwise, we're going to because. Mike, you know that lots of people predicted that if the Democrats kept going the way they were going, meaning neoliberalism and corporatism, that was going to lead to a rise of a right-wing fascist demagogue. Well, who said that? Bill Moyer said that. Michael Moore said that. Lots of people said that. Chomsky predicted that would happen. Chris Hedges said that would happen. So lots of people predicted that would happen. A lot of people smarter than me and been around longer than me. And they saw. And so guess what? That happened. Instead of in a sense, we dodged a bullet with Trump because he's such an incompetent maniac and he's so unpopular that he can't get most of his horrible stuff through, which is where we are right now. So that's what I tell people, that if we don't have something to replace Trump with, that we're just going to get a worse Trump in 2020 or a worse Trump in 2024. That's what you have to remember. You have to have something. If Hillary Clinton was president right now, we would not be talking about the Democrats taking over the House or the Senate,
right,
which is what we're talking about right now. If Hillary Clinton was president, the Democrats would have been wiped out even harder in that Virginia election, and there would have been absolutely no chance for them in Alabama. So you got to look at it. You got to think. People, I try to tell people, you can't think just one election cycle. You have to think beyond the one election cycle, because if you only think one election cycle, you get Trump. That's how we got Trump. Well, we're going to do the lesser of two evil. And Mike, not only is this progressive maniacs like me saying this, but guess who else is saying this now? The unions are saying this now, Mike. They had a convention recently. They have a yearly get-together, and they got together. I'm talking the AFL-CIO. I'm talking the teachers union. I'm talking the SEIU, the biggest union. They got together, and they all agreed that it's time to stop voting lesser of two evils, because lesser of two evils has gotten us nothing. That's their words, not mine, and they want to start a Labor Party. Wouldn't that be amazing to have a Labor Party? You don't have to think what they're for or who they're against. You know what it's about, the Labor Party. And I think if they did that and Bernie Sanders was the head of it, we could change politics in the United States. But the weird thing that's happening now, Mike, is that Bernie Sanders, who spent 30 years of his life trying to convince convince people to vote for policies and ideas and not vote for parties is instead, when he's gotten all this power, he's the most popular guy in the country, everybody's on his side. Instead of using that power to start a viable third party and wipe out the corporatists, he's decided to use all that energy and all that enthusiasm he's gained to sheepdog people into the goddamn Democratic Party and use all of his power to prop up that corrupted two-party system that he has fucking railed against for 30 years. That doesn't make any goddamn sense to me. Does it make sense to you?
Yeah, I think that you're bringing up something that's really important, because this kind of goes back to the DNC Unity Tour that he did. That was really mind-boggling to me at first. I know you and I both talked about it. It didn't make any sense. And the one way that I've been able to rationalize this, with Bernie Sanders not seemingly getting the hint that Democrats just aren't that into him, is that I think that maybe he's trying to posture himself to run in 2020, and after that, maybe he goes in a different direction, since I do think he could potentially be the Democratic nominee in 2020 if they don't rig it against him, which, they're probably going to try to pull some type of bullshit, but I think he has enough name recognition to potentially win. So that's the one way that I rationalize it, and I don't know if you agree with that, but basically I think that we're gonna learn a lot more about Bernie Sanders in 2020, and, if he does become the nominee, then he does get to take control of the DNC. So that's the only way I could think about it. But other than that, it is incredibly frustrating to see him continuously defend the Democratic Party when they don't deserve to be defended. And this comes from progressives like Elizabeth Warren as well, who on TYT with Jen, she did a spirited defense of Joe Manchin, which made me so angry. Because these are people who are not your allies. They might have a D in front of their name, and they might be, a little bit less shitty than Republicans, but they're still doing things that are harmful. So I don't know if you agree with that premise. It's the way that I kind of justify it, but it doesn't necessarily make me feel any better about Bernie Sanders waiting until 2020 to maybe fully, blow the lid off of the party.
It's too late. It's too late at that point. He needs to do it now before the midterms, right? So that's what he really needs to do. And that would also pressure the people who are left in the Democratic Party to be more progressive, because there's a guy who's actually giving you an alternative. Hey, my God, there's now an alternative to corporate Democrats. It's the most popular guy in the country. So I don't know if you remember, but I'm sure you do. Hillary Clinton was aping his policies by the end.
Right. That's true.
Primaries. She was completely aping his policies. And so that's what the corporate Democrats would be forced to do if he was out there putting the pressure on them, except he's not out there putting the pressure on them. He's out there, again, sheepdogging people into the fucking Democratic Party, which is the biggest misuse of the power I could ever imagine. I can see him not wanting to do it in the 2016 election in the general. I could see it was still a mistake. Because we got Trump anyway. So Bernie Sanders had he had a chance to beat Trump, and he had a chance to change politics in America forever. And he chose neither of those things. He chose to prop up a corporatist warmonger, which was 100% mistake. Why he did it, everybody speculates. I don't know why he did it. But the only reason he gave was because he didn't want to end up like Ralph Nader and be a pariah to the Democrats. Who gives a shit? Those are the fucking people you're supposed to be fighting against anyway, Bernie. So, again, this isn't about beating up on Bernie because, thank God for Bernie. And he's flawed like all human beings. And he didn't show up when we were in D.C. For the Draft Bernie convention. And we went to his office and gave him 50,000 signatures. He didn't receive those. Cornel West called him out for that. And I support Cornel in calling him out. And so Bernie, again, like all human beings, is going to let us down. He let me down. And so now it's time for me to kind of remind him that you're going to be dead pretty soon anyway. And who gives a fuck what the Democrats think about you? How about let's keep going and actually change politics in America and start a viable third party that represents workers?
Right. It sounds like you are applying a free market model to democracy, which I think is the only area where a free market would work. Competition breeds innovation. If there were more parties, the Democratic Party, the biggest party, would, like a giant corporation, would be forced to compete because these little guys are going to come up and take their spot. So yeah, no, I agree with you with criticizing Bernie. Whenever I criticize Bernie as well, I do get pushback from a lot of progressives, but I think the most important thing to remember is that Bernie literally does listen to our criticisms. He might reject us sometimes. I know that Chuck Todd featured my criticism of Bernie Sanders in 2016 when I called him out for not campaigning for Tim Canova, and Bernie kind of just laughed it off. But he does.
Yeah. So what was that about, by the way? I never got a straight answer about why he wouldn't endorse Tim Canova.
We basically, it's an open question. What it seems like was that maybe there was some type of backroom deal between Hillary Clinton's campaign and himself, maybe for policy concessions, to not, sink Debbie Wasserman Schultz's campaign if she adopted something that he wanted. I don't know. It seemed really weird, and at that point, that was probably where I felt the most discouraged about politics. Because if Bernie, at that point, I said, if he sold out, we're fucked, because we have literally no one else who's going to represent us. So yeah, I think it's absolutely important that we do keep pressure on Bernie Sanders as well, because you're right, he's not perfect. And the good thing is he's willing to listen to us sometimes, not all the time, right? But yeah, that's why shows like yours, I think, are incredibly important, because because the Republican Party is so bad, everybody's afraid to call out the Democratic Party's flaws. When you can't do that, you have to pull no punches. You have to make sure that people know what's going on. And the fact of the matter is that both parties are fucking us. And I think that what you're doing is so important, Jimmy.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. Right back at you.
Thank you.
If it wasn't for shows like us, there would be nobody out there holding the Democrats' feet to the fire. Nobody. I mean, even lots of our favorite lefty online news shows don't do what they should in that regard. They're still focusing on Trump, and they're still focusing on Russiagate, which you and I have, I think, agree is a big mistake. And by the way, the Russiagate thing is 100% propaganda. In fact, I don't know if you saw that article which in Politico this week, which I did a video. I haven't dropped it yet, but I'm sure by the time people watch this, I will have dropped it. Mike Morell, who used to be the deputy director of the CIA, he was in the CIA for decades. And he did an interview in Politico where he said that he expects now that there will be no charges of treason or collusion or any of that against Trump. And they asked him why, and he said, well, think about it. You have every reporter from the Washington Times, New York Post, CNN, everybody in the country is trying to break that story, and they haven't. Plus, they've been investigating him, this thing for over a year, and if Mueller had anything, it would have leaked already. That's what he said. He said if they had anything, it would have leaked. So the fact that nothing is leaked and nobody in the newspaper, by the way, they keep saying they have stuff in the news media, and then they have to walk it back 5 minutes later. So, and then they have to fire people and suspend people, and if they're just keep. And isn't it weird, Mike? Isn't it weird that Glenn Greenwald made this point, that when they get the Russiagate story wrong, it's always wrong in the same way. They never get it wrong going the other way. It's always wrong in Trump collusion as a treasonous. They never get it wrong where, hey, we've debunked the Russiagate. They never have it that way. It's only the other way. And why is that? That's because their sources are all the CIA or partisan Democrats on the Intelligence Committee. Their sources are all establishment people. That's the narrative they want to have pushed. In fact, MSNBC's top intelligence reporter has already been outed by The Intercept as being in bed with the CIA, and MSNBC went and hired him anyway. So that's literally happening. The guy who owns the Washington Post is in bed with the CIA, and he sits on a Pentagon board. But the guys at the newspaper, the hacks at the Washington Post, will tell you that that's crazy if you think that influences anything, even though we're living in a neoliberal nightmare, and even though somebody at the Washington Post actually did write an article that criticized Jeff Bezos' horrible labor practices, which we all know how they treat their employees at Amazon, and he wrote an article about that, and he was disciplined by the Washington Post. So you tell me Jeff Bezos doesn't tell his newspaper what to print. And if you think that, I've got some fucking prime real estate in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean I'd like to sell.
That's just it. And I didn't. I'll look out for that video when you post it. I didn't see this, but if this all does fall through, then the Democratic Party they've got to realize that you can't just attack Trump. You can't be the anti-Trump party. You have to offer a vision. I mean, that's all we're asking for, but nobody can say what they stand for. You did a great interview with Sally Boynton Brown. She ran to be the DNC chair. You tried to get her to explain what the party stood for, and she couldn't give you anything. It was embarrassing for her, and no disrespect to her. But I mean, make something up on the spot. She just shut down. How do you not know what you stand for? If you ask you and I, Jimmy, we can spout off 100 different policies, Medicare for all, net neutrality. I mean, why is it that a simple question can't be answered? It's because really, they're a shell of a party. They have no core values anymore. It's all about the money. And I think that what you do in exposing this is really important. So I don't want to take up too much of your time. So if you could tell us where to find you and where to watch your show and your website and whatnot, that would be great.
Can I just say one more thing
Yes.
before we, the reason why the Democrats can't say what they're for, it's because they've been bought by the people they're supposed to be working against and fighting against, right? It's as if Weight Watchers got bought by Twinkies, and everybody's wondering why Weight Watchers keeps telling us to eat cookies. And you know what I mean? It's like, why does Weight Watchers want me to eat cakes with cream in the middle? Because they're owned by Twinkies. That's the exact problem with it. That's why they can't tell you what they're for, because they're owned by people who don't want them to be for that stuff. So people can find me at jimmydorecomedy.com. And that's the great place. So jimmydorecomedy.com, and my Twitter is Jimmy_Dore, D-O-R-E. Jimmy_Dore, jimmydorecomedy.com. And we tour the country doing live shows like we did with you in Portland. And we'll be back in Portland coming up early next summer. And hopefully you can do that show with us.
Absolutely. I will be there. So yeah, that's a great note to end with, that Twinkie analogy. I'm going to have to borrow that, Jimmy. Of course, I'll credit you, but that is just brilliance.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Thanks so much for coming on the
Mike,
show.
Great week.
Take care.
Great talking to you.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.